The Man Who Heard Too Much. If you like the story, please subscribe. So let's started. Everyone in the town knew Ishan, the blind man who lived alone at the edge of the old railway colony. He had lost his sight years ago in an accident, but people whispered that when his eyes went dark, something else inside him awakened. His hearing became unnaturally sharp, so sharp that he could recognize footsteps from half a street away, count breaths in a silent room, and hear whispers no one else could. Every night at exactly 2:11 a.m., Ishan heard a sound. At first, it was faint, like bare feet brushing against dry dust. Slow, careful, always stopping just outside his door. Ishan would sit upright on his bed, heart pounding, ears straining. He could hear breathing on the other side, deep, wet, and wrong. But when he opened the door, there was nothing. No footsteps retreating, no wind, just silence, and a smell like damp soil. The sounds returned the next night, and the next. Soon, Ishan realized something terrifying: the sounds were getting closer. No longer outside the door, but inside the house. The scrape of nails on the wall. The soft thud of something crawling across the ceiling. A voice, barely louder than a breath, whispering his name in a tone that felt ancient, hungry. One night, the whisper spoke clearly. "You hear me, because you were meant to." Ishan tried to scream, but his throat locked. He could hear the thing standing inches from him, its head tilting, bones cracking softly as it listened to his fear. Then came the sound that broke him, the slow, wet opening of a mouth right beside his ear. The next morning, neighbors found Ishan sitting on his bed, eyes wide open and unblinking. He was dead, but his ears were bleeding. Now, people say if you pass that house late at night and stay very quiet, you can hear two sets of footsteps inside. One slow and heavy, and one, listening. They buried Ishan before sunset, because no one wanted to be near his body after dark. The doctor said his ears had ruptured due to internal pressure, but the old priest shook his head. He had seen this before. When something speaks too close to the soul, the body breaks. That night, the sounds did not stop. Inside the locked house, the floorboards creaked under invisible weight. The old radio in the corner switched on by itself, spitting out broken static mixed with something else, breathing. Deep, patient, listening. The walls echoed with a soft tapping, like fingers testing bone. Across the street, a boy named Arib woke up screaming. He swore he could hear footsteps walking inside Ishan's empty house, and then stopping. Waiting, as if whatever lived there had realized Ishan was gone and was searching for a new pair of ears. At 2:11 a.m., every dog in the colony began to howl. Inside Ishan's bedroom, the air thickened. Something dragged itself across the floor, leaving wet sounds behind. The bed creaked under pressure, as if an unseen body was sitting exactly where Ishan once sat, head tilted, listening. Then came the whisper again, but this time, it was different. "He heard for me. Now you will." Arib clutched his ears as the sound pierced his skull. It wasn't loud, no, it was worse. It crawled, a sound that moved like an insect, slipping into his ears, scratching the inside of his head. He could hear memories that weren't his, bones breaking, throats choking, prayers swallowed by darkness. The next morning, Arib was found sitting upright in his bed, blood trickling from his ears. His eyes were perfectly fine, but he couldn't see, and when his mother cried his name, he turned his head slowly, and smiled. "Be quiet," he whispered. "It's listening." That night, the colony learned the truth. The thing was never haunting the house. It was haunting those who could hear it. Long before Ishan lost his sight, long before the colony was built, the land itself was never silent. In 1947, when the railway lines were still being carved through the earth, workers complained about strange noises beneath the ground. Not loud sounds, whispers. Whispers that came from the soil, calling men by name, repeating their thoughts before they spoke them aloud. Those who listened too long began bleeding from their ears. Those who covered their ears went mad anyway. One engineer recorded it in his diary before hanging himself in the signal room. "It does not want eyes. It wants attention." The sound was buried when the railway foundation was sealed. But burial only muffled it. It waited. Decades later, Ishan became the perfect vessel. When his sight died, the silence inside his head became wide enough for something else to enter. The sound found him immediately. At first it helped him, guiding his steps, warning him of danger, teaching him how to see through echo and breath. Ishan thought it was a gift. It wasn't. The sound fed on listening. On fear sharpened by darkness. Each night it spoke closer, deeper, until it no longer needed to whisper. It lived inside him, stretching his hearing beyond what a human body could survive. But when Ishan died, the sound was left homeless. At 2:11 a.m. on the seventh night after Arib went blind, he sat up in bed and tilted his head toward the wall. His lips moved, repeating words that were not his own. The first listener is awake. Deep beneath the colony, something shifted. The buried foundation cracked. The railway tracks vibrated without a train. People woke up clutching their ears as a low hum spread through the ground, too soft to escape, too sharp to ignore. Then the whispers spread. Radios whispered names. Phone calls played breathing instead of voices. Silence became dangerous. Those who tried to drown it with noise only heard it louder, clearer, closer. By dawn, 3 people were blind. By nightfall, 5 more were listening. And the sound was no longer whispering. It was calling. By the time the government sealed the colony, it was already too late. People believed the danger was the sound, so they tried to destroy it with noise. Loudspeakers screamed prayers through the streets. Generators roared all night. Metal banged against metal until ears rang and heads throbbed. That was the worst mistake. The sound did not fear noise. It hid inside it. Those who played music heard something breathing between the notes. Those who shouted felt whispers slip through the gaps in their words. Even the ringing in damaged ears began to form sentences. At 2:11 a.m., the final phase began. Every listener sat upright at the same time. Arib stood in the middle of the street, eyes clouded white, blood crusted around his ears. Around him, the others gathered, men, women, children, all perfectly still, heads tilted at the same unnatural angle, as if listening to something far beneath the earth. Then the ground answered. A deep vibration rolled through the colony, not a quake, but a voice without words. Windows shattered outward. Railway tracks bent like soft wire. From beneath the houses came the sound of something enormous shifting, stretching after a very long sleep. The listeners spoke together, mouths moving in perfect sync. Silence was never empty. One by one, their ears split. Blood poured down their necks as their faces twisted, not in pain, but in relief. The sound was no longer outside them. It was complete. In the command tent, the last surviving officer pressed his hands over his ears, screaming orders into a dead radio. But the radio screamed back, not static, not voices, but listening. The officer collapsed, clutching his head as the sound crawled through bone and memory. At dawn, the colony was quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no wind, no insects, just a heavy, unnatural stillness that made the air feel thick enough to choke on. Rescue teams entered hours later. They found no bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle, only people, standing, facing the ground, listening, and far beneath their feet, the earth was no longer whispering. It was awake.